today is very different than the one we had in the 60s or 70s. The English community, to give you an example, 75% of parents who have kids at school here in Montreal and elsewhere in Quebec who are non-francophones, 75% of them now send their kids to a French school, immersion programs, or bilingual schools, so they want their kids to be bilingual and to grow in French and in English. So it's not French against English. And I think that nowadays my nationalism is positive. Like I see Anglophones as allies to keep our uniqueness in America as a French society. I don't see them as a threat. I don't see them as enemies. But I'm a nationalist. Like I do believe, I don't believe that Quebec should become English and we should assimilate. That's not the point here. So it's very different to say we want to break up Canada and we want to completely separate and have it our own, and saying we want to promote French. And when you want to become Quebec Premier, as I do, you have to understand that one of your first duties is that you're not just the leader of a province like elsewhere or a state in the US, you're also the political leader of the French minority in America. There's no one politically that has more power than you do. And one of your primary roles is, of course, to promote and to protect French. And I want to do that. And I think it's important for the Quebec Premier to do that as well. So that's on the linguistic front, if I could say so, the way that we see it. And it does, as you said, the youth has a different approach, because people who are, I would say the shift is between 55 and 60 years old right now in Quebec. When you look at the polls, we're dominating. The latest Main Street research was saying that we're dominating between 18 and 50-ish, and then there's a complete switch. And then when you're at 65 and over, it's like 11-1 in favor of the CAQ, the governing party right now in Quebec. So you see, it's a completely reversal. And we're especially popular as conservatives among people between 35 and 50 who still have kids at home. Those people are the most hardcore conservatives that you can find right now in Quebec. So it's interesting to look at the demographics, but we have to understand also that we're post-crisis, and the crisis changed the political landscape as well. You cannot lock down a society for over 2 years and think it's not going to have any political impact. The people who suffered the most and who were the less at risk are now, politically intervening and expressing their frustration at a certain extent. And that also explains why we're particularly popular among parents of young kids compared to seniors. So it's for a guy like you who likes to analyze what's going on in societies, I think Quebec is an interesting case, because we had, in North America, we were the most locked down society, right? There's nowhere else in the continent where restaurants were shut down as long as they were here, where even the construction industry was shut down, where even we had passports, the longest time to show passports, vaccine passports, to get in restaurants or bars or gyms, or we had a curfew. The longest curfew, the most severe curfews. 50,000 Quebecers got caught by the police, were either arrested or given tickets of $1,500 each on average. So, I mean, we went through a very, very strong period. The government was the most severe at many extent, and so it's probably having a biggest political impact. So it's not surprising that you see a political leader like me raising as quickly as we did over the last year, because the government went way very far with the authority, and now there's kind of a counterbalance of people who are looking for a politician that respects much more their civic rights and their individual freedoms. So it's a counterbalance, I think we are. And I want also to point out one thing, because that may be of interest to everybody as well. Here in Quebec, we have never seen a political party raising as quickly as the Conservative Party has over the last year. When I decided to run for the leadership of the party less than 2 years ago, there were 500 members in the party. As we speak, we have 60,000 members. We're by far the largest party in terms of membership. We went from 1% in the polls to somewhere between 15 and 20% right now. We were the party that has the largest amount of donors in Quebec this year. We're now represented at the National Assembly because I convinced one of the members of the CAC to cross the floor and join us. We're going to participate in the leaders' debate. We're going up very, very quickly. And we've never seen that. Usually for a political party, it takes a few elections to reach the point where we're at right now. For us, it took us a year. And when you spoke about the media, the impact of the media, I just want to underline that during my leadership race between November 2020 and April 2021, that I got one single article in a Main Street newspaper, a daily paper in Quebec. It was in Le Devoir when José Werner, a senator, decided to support me and become the president of my leadership race. And Le Devoir wrote an article, which is not the main daily paper, and that was the only article. And at the end of the leadership race, I had 15,000 members. I had more members than the governing party of the Premier of Quebec. And not one single other media did talk about us. They didn't even acknowledge our existence. So it shows the shift, and it explains why people like you are more popular than complete networks now. And it explains the difference and also the generational clash at a certain extent in terms of media.
Right. Well, I should also point out for the listeners, so I know Quebec reasonably well because I lived in Montreal from 1985 to 1993. And I loved Montreal. And for all of you who are listening, especially in North America, where it's easy, there is no better place on the North American continent to visit in many ways if you're interested in an urban holiday than Montreal. Montreal is a great city. And I say that despite the fact that the province that I grew up in, Alberta, is in many ways the most it has the most fractious relationship in many ways with Quebec, partly because Alberta is very English in its linguistic traditions. I took French in school throughout my entire life, but no one in Alberta speaks French to speak of, and it's very difficult to pick up a language when even your teachers can't really speak it, and there's no use of it in public. I moved to Montreal when the separatist movement was really quite strong. And I moved there with my wife, who had a very difficult time obtaining employment, although she could speak French reasonably well. She was Anglophone, and there were real obstacles in her path. I went to an English university, and so that protected me in some sense from the consequences of my linguistic ignorance. But I loved Montreal. And although I was not very happy in some sense, being a Westerner, about Quebec nationalism or Quebec separatism in particular, one of the things I did understand very rapidly was that part of this stunning charm of Montreal